just remember that I haven't told you enough about my grandfather in London. He was a soldier, a Prussian soldier in the War of 1870. And I have a picture of him in Prussian uniform. And he was not in a fighting unit. He was a telegraphist. And he was stationed in the south of Germany, in Pfungstadt. And in Pfungstadt, there was a small Jewish community. So of course, he got in touch with them. And he started there a Chevre Chasse, which existed till, I was told, till Hitler's time. He got very friendly with the family Yidel, and this family Yidel had a son of marriageable age who was still single, and my grandfather had a sister of marriageable age who was not married, and they made a shidduch between the two. And Tante Johanna, I still remember her, and Mr. Yidel got married, and eventually their daughter, Bertha, is the one who introduced her uncle and aunt to my mother, and so was the cause of the shidduch of my parents. And Bertha Yidel and bye-bye, he won't go. If it's a schnorrer, just give him. Bertha Yidel eventually, when my mother got married and came to live in London, she also lived in London, and they were very, very close friends. And when her husband died in 1918, my father became the apotropos of the children. There were 5 children there in the family. And I remember when he was still living in London, on Pesach, the whole family staying with us and sitting at the Seder table. As a matter of fact, the relationship more or less continues, and not quite as strongly as it used to be, but some of my children or some of their children are still, of the Yidel family or the Kolczynski family, are still friends. And Bertha Yidel was a very clever seamstress. So she had daughters, and my mother had daughters, and they used to go shopping together. That's to say, they would go down to the West End and look what the styles were for children that and that age, and then she went home and she would draw what she had seen there in the shops, and they would go together and buy materials, and Bertha would cut and they would sew dresses for the children, the latest styles. The friendship lasted really their whole lives. Okay, we'll stop there. So I went to the authorities there, and I said, took along a birth certificate, and I said I want a passport, Dutch passport for my child. So they said to me, well, we're very sorry, but here there is a Napoleonic code, and only the father can get a passport for the child. Mother has no rights. So I said, my husband's in America, and here, look, you see, he sent me a letter, a telegram that I should come to the child. Well, anybody can send a telegram. How do we know he really sent it, that you didn't get somebody else to send it? Well, nothing doing, wouldn't give me a passport. So I went back to Antwerp and sent a telegram to Bernard. I'm very sorry, but you're lousy Dutch. Give me a passport, I can't come. So he came back. When he came back after all the Chagim. He was in America for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. And When he came back, his father said to him, "This is not the time to do business. We have to get away from here. There's going to be war." And they went around. We were 8 people who needed visas. Not 8 people, 8 Jews. Different story. They went around, and Brazil was willing to give us visas. So we took the visas. They were valid. They must have been valid about half a year at that time. And I was pregnant again. So we slowly made preparations for leaving. We were going to leave right after Pesach. My Benno's mother, Olea Shalom, and brother, Alav Shalom, the 2 of them went to Poland and visited the Mishpocha there and told them that we are leaving Europe because we are afraid of war, and they should also leave. These families were, most of them, quite fairly well-to-do, so it would not have been a problem for them to go traveling somewhere, even to get visas, passports, with maybe a little something. But they thought that we were totally crazy, and they said that they don't dream of leaving. We put our belongings in storage, furniture, books, everything, whatever, because since we were going on so-called business visas to Brazil, not as immigrants, we didn't want to take too much luggage along, only a few suitcases, and all the rest we put in storage. And we rented out our apartment, which was also most probably a mistake, because we rented it out to Jews from Germany who had come to Holland. Goodness knows what happened to them. And the 2 houses, the house of my parents-in-law and our house, we gave over to a Jewish real estate agent. And we left the boat that we took, left from Tilbury, England, and it left on Shabbos.
What date is this about?
Uh-huh.
When is this about? What month?
This is right after Pesach 1939, May, June. So we went there on Thursday or Friday, I don't know, and my parents also came there to say goodbye. My father also thought that we were crazy. Later on, of course, he saw that we were right. We got on the boat, and I remember we got on the boat, and then we had told Helen we're getting on the boat, we're going on a trip on a boat. So she said, "Where's the boat?" She thought it would be some small thing, and she would see the water, and so she could see it. Anyway, so we were my parents-in-law, Benno's brother, Benno's sister, we 2, and 2 small children. Helen was 2, and Mickey was 3 months old. Mickey in a little basket. We got on the boat. And the boat made stops along the way. And my father-in-law, he was the one who talked to us to leave. He said we should leave because there's going to be war. And then afterwards he was sorry, and Benno had to kind of push him to come with us. And then every time Benno would say, "Well, come along till the next stop." and this way we took him along. And we stopped in Portugal, in Lisbon. And we stopped, I think, in the Azores and there on the islands, and then in the north of Brazil, and then in Rio de Janeiro. Our muzzle was that my Uncle Mush, one of my father's older brothers, was in Rio at that time with his wife, buying diamonds for the firm. and he came to the boat up. And since my Uncle Mush had been in Brazil several times to buy diamonds, he spoke Portuguese, and he helped us, and he had rented rooms for us in a hotel not too far from where he lived. And my aunt, who was a lovely, lovely, wonderful woman, invited us quite often for dinner, so it made the getting used to the new country and the new language made it much easier. And then we looked around to rent an apartment, and we rented one in Copacabana. We also took a teacher and took a few lessons in Portuguese, so we could move around. But for instance, reading the newspaper, I could do right away because I knew French, I knew Latin. Well, maybe there was once in a while a word I didn't know, but most of the time I could read the newspaper. But in Copacabana, there was nothing Jewish. There was no synagogue, there was no kosher grocery, anything of the kind. So Benno decided, let's try and make a minion in the house. And the strange thing was that in a place where we thought that there were no Jews, once you started something Jewish, then they appeared. And in the beginning, we had minyan on Shabbos morning only. We had no Sefer Torah, so we didn't read. But and occasionally it would happen that we needed a 10th man, and somebody would come knocking at the door. It was a Jew who was going from door to door selling something, so then we said, come in, make the 10th man for the minyan. After Shabbos, I'll buy something from you, and so on. And then it was getting closer and closer to Rosh Hashanah, to do something about it. And then by then we already knew that here's a Jew, there's a Jew, this store is run by Jews, and so on and so forth. So he rented a small hall, and we're going to have Yom Noron services. We need a Sefer Torah. Now in town, which was a long distance away from where we were living, there was a large shul, Jewish community, so we went there and told the Gaboim there that he's starting a minyan in Copacabana and he needs a Sefer Torah. Would they lend him a Sefer Torah? So they said yes, they're willing to lend him a Sefer Torah, but he'll have to pay them so and so much. And he said no, he's not willing to pay a Jewish community for lending a Sefer Torah to a new building community that's being built. He won't pay for that. They should have enough feeling for it and give the Sefer Torah free of charge. They had plenty of Sefer Torah, so it would not have hurt them in any way. No, they have to be paid. So I said, goodbye anyway. And then, a few days later, we saw an ad in the paper that a man from Germany had come from some small town in Germany, a refugee running away from Hitler, and he has a Sefer Torah which he wants to sell. Well, that was a different story. And Benno went there. It was a man alone. Must have been pretty poor. He was living in one room. And his community in Germany, was probably in a small town, had given him this Sefer Torah to take along to save it from Hitler. And he was not a religious man. He had the Sefer Torah in a suitcase under his bed. So to him, Benno was willing to pay. He took the Sefer Torah, so we had a Sefer Torah. And we found a man who was a good chazan, and we had wonderful services there, Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. Eventually, this modest start was successful. They rented a place for all year round, a small place, meetings, davening, and so on. And eventually, got enough money to buy a plot where they would build a shul. But they didn't have enough money to build a shul, so they sold half the plot, and with the money that they got from selling half the plot, they built a shul. But by the time they built the shul and the shul was standing, we had left already and gone to America. But we came back on a visit after the war, and then the shul was standing there, and Benno and Boris went there to demo. The terrible thing was that Brazil was a dictatorship. And for instance, if you had a meeting of the members of the shul, of in this rented little place that they had, you had to have a police inspector present at the meeting, because maybe you were going to plot something against the dictator, so you had to be there. Very unpleasant, but all right, that's how it was. In the beginning, when we were in Rio, we only ate milchik. But since the war started in September, and we saw that, we realized that we didn't know how long we were going to be there, we decided we were going to eat meat as well. And the trip from Copacabana to Tijuca, the area where there was a kosher butcher, quite a long trip in the tram. And I used to go once in a while to buy some meat. I was the only woman customer in the butcher shop. All the other customers were men. The women sent their husbands there to shop. The boss of the shop was a lady, Donna Baile, and she had as an assistant a black man, a goy, who cut up the meat. But it was kosher, it was, and shrit and so on. Because in that area in Tijuca there was a good Jewish community, a Jewish school, a mikveh. But the mikveh was also a story. Right? I would go to the mikveh when it was tough, and very often you got there and they would say, and it took at least half an hour, 3/4 of an hour on the tram to get there, and then the woman would say, I'm sorry, there's no water. The water supply in Rio was very, very bad in those days. Today, later on, they improved it and brought in those things. It was terrible. Very often we had no water in the apartment. Turned on the tap and nothing came out. And I would go and buy bottled water to wash my children. Some of the pleasures of living in Rio in those days. Then a nest happened. Mamash a nest. When Benno came back from America, he decided that he wants to go and live in America. And we went to the American consulate in Rotterdam and registered there for immigration visas for the United States. Now, in those days, immigration visas were given on a basis of the country where you were born. So for each country, there were a certain number allotted each year. Benno was born in Poland. I was born in England. Now, the number allotted to England, I don't know how large it was, but it was more than enough, because from England you wanted to leave and go to America. But from Poland, lots of people wanted to go, and so there was always a shortage of visas. One day, the American consul calls us, we should come to his office. We had, in meanwhile, moved the registration from Rotterdam to Rio de Janeiro, to the consulate there. So he calls us, we should come to his office. We come to his office, and he says to us, you are the only family I can help. What do you mean? He says, I have one Polish quota visa. I can't help any family with that except your family. Because the law says that minor children travel on the same quota as the father. So actually that would mean that you need 3 Polish visas. However, if you don't travel together, if the children travel with the mother, I can give you 3 English quotas and 1 Polish. And he said, "What, here in this office, you told me that you're not traveling together. What you do when you leave here, that's none of my business. You do what you like. But in this office, you told me you're not traveling together. I'll give you 1 Polish, 3 British, and you can go to America." I tell you, Ines, mamas. So we took the visas and decided to go. In meanwhile, what I forgot to say is that we didn't stay in Copacabana, but we moved into the center of town, because that was easier for Benno, wanted to do some business and so on, and the apartment that we had in Copacabana was not so good. And we actually spent, from the time that we arrived till the time we left, a year and a half. And we left after the second Yom Ha'Noraim that we spent in New York. And we were on the boat on Sukkot, so that was fine, good. On the boat, the car for the Sukkot, very good. The trip from Rio to New York lasted 11 days, and I was sick. And I knew what the trouble was, though the doctor on the boat didn't know. But I knew. I had I'll remember in a minute. And Benno had to take care of the 2 children, which he didn't really enjoy, but what could he do? I was sick in bed. And when we arrived in New York, we were immigrants. Now, I don't know, have you ever been to Ellis Island since they opened this as a museum? No. There you see how they treated the immigrants in a terrible way, just terrible. And they wanted to be sure that the immigrants were healthy people. So they had all kinds of tricks. All kinds of tricks. For instance, when you arrive, if you go, next time you're in New York, you should go to Ellis Island. It's very interesting. You arrive in a huge hall, and then you have to go upstairs. And along the stairs, they had doctors and nurses standing and watching the people to see if maybe somebody limps or doesn't talk or doesn't see or whatever, something wrong. But we were on the boat coming from Brazil, most probably first class, and the immigration people came onto the boat. And we come there with 2 small children. Helen was 1930, she was 2.5, 3 years old. So he asks her name, and she wouldn't answer. And he asked again, and we started to tell her, tell her name. She knew it perfectly well, she wouldn't answer. And he said he won't let us off the boat unless she says her name, because he has to make sure that she's a normal child. Well, I don't know, we stood there for about a quarter of an hour trying to get her to say her name, which she finally did, and he let us off. And one of my uncle, and we arrived on Shabbos. We arrived on Shabbos. One of my Uncle Nathan's employees, a Goy, came to meet us at the boat. So he took the luggage and the children in a taxi to a hotel on Washington Square, and we walked from the Hudson River across Canal Street to the hotel, and we we stayed there till night. My sister had come to America before the war started, I think, and she came to me to pick us up after Shabbos, and she rented a furnished apartment for us. And there we are. We were in New York. Wonderful.
And his parents stayed there.
His parents stayed there, and they eventually, his father and brother together, started a diamond polishing factory there. And Annie eventually got married there, and a little bit later divorced. And we stayed in this furnished place that Phyllis had found for us for a short while, and then we rented an empty apartment, and then we bought some furniture, and we moved in. And we still felt very insecure. Didn't know what was going to be, were we going to stay there or not, and so on. So for instance, this apartment that we rented, which was a nice apartment where we lived for 8 years, when we rented it, we were looking for an apartment on a very short lease. This apartment was on a very short lease, 8 months. But times in New York in those days were very bad. It was 1939, 1940. Economically, things were very bad in the United States. And there were a lot of empty apartments all around. So that the landlords were willing to do all kinds of things for you if you rented their apartment. So it was for 8 months, but the lease was only for 7 months. He painted the apartment, he polished the floors, he gave us a new stove, not a new refrigerator, but a new stove, and in those days also new blinds on the windows and things like that. Only we should rent the apartment, you know. And it was next to the Joan of Arc Junior High School, which was terrific, because eventually the yard of the junior high school, which was always open in those days, later on no more, but in those days was open, became the yard of my children. They would go and play there, and I could watch them from the window, which was fun. And we lived there for about 8 years. And then it really became too small because I had 2 more children, or 4 children. It was not a very large apartment. And we moved to 305 Riverside Drive. What was good also about this apartment, the first one that we rented, was on 93rd Street, near Columbus Avenue, between Columbus and Amsterdam. And it was near Central Park, which was wonderful because it took the children to the park. There were playgrounds there, so it was fine. And it was also near 98th Street, where there was a shul, and there was kosher food and everything available in the neighborhood. It was a good choice. But then it became a little bit too tight, and we looked for a larger apartment, and by then it was difficult to find. But we saw an ad in the paper. Then when it became difficult, then because the war had started, then a lot of people who lived outside the city, in the suburbs, moved into the city because of gas rations. They couldn't drive as much as so it was easier for them then to live in the city, to go to their offices, businesses. And then they were up to all kinds of tricks. So there was a lady, she advertised in the paper, she has an apartment, a large apartment, and she's willing to make a deal. So what was the deal? She had a daughter who got married, and so she didn't need this large apartment anymore. and she was alone, she had no husband, so she needed 2 small apartments. So she had found an apartment for herself. Her daughter had found an apartment for herself, but she wanted to make a deal. And yes, we showed her our apartment. She said, no, that's not for her, that's too big for her. But upstairs, in the building where we were living, there was a family living in 2 rooms. We had 3 rooms, living in 2 rooms, and they wanted 3 rooms. And she wanted 2 rooms. So there was arranged that on the same day, the people from upstairs moved down. We moved from our apartment to Riverside Drive. The lady from Riverside Drive moved upstairs, and it was a whole business. And it worked. But we had to buy some of her furniture. See, she had to make some money out of the deal. All right, so we bought some of the furniture. It didn't matter because we used it as long as we lived in that apartment till we moved to Israel. And we were very, it was a very good deal because it was a beautiful apartment. Yeah, about 30 years, I think. It must have been about 30, not quite 25 years really. Big apartment, big room, beautiful. View over the Hudson, wonderful, wonderful place. Not too far from the shul. Later on there was a shul right next door, and so on and so forth.
You owned it or anything?
What?
You owned it?